Welcome back to another reading roundup. As you can see, I'm trying something new. I've got my microphone set up, so I'm going to experiment with editing that way, having the voice coming through this instead of through the microphone built into the camera. Hopefully that gets rid of some of the outside noise and all that stuff. Hopefully it's clearer. Anyway, I got 3 books to talk about here, so let's just jump right into it. So the first book that I read was Natural Beauty by Ling Huang. Hopefully I pronounced that right. So this was a book that was it's essentially about this woman starts working for this beauty product company, I guess is the best way to describe it. You know, they sell skincare, lotions, and gels and all this stuff like that, as well as like vitamins and all this other stuff. And they really encourage like these alternate health options. Kind of goes into that whole spiritual crystals and herbs sort of lifestyle. I don't really know how to describe it too well, I guess. um, but you know, the alternative medicine, instead of taking pills, you know, it's like, oh, I'll have this herbal tea with like these weird chemicals in it and see if that works out. Some people are really into that. I've never really been too educated on that kind of stuff, so forgive my ignorance on that. So the book follows the young woman working at this place, and then more and more stuff gets uncovered, and it's supposed to be like this satirical horror novel. I say it's supposed to be because I don't know if it really hits that mark in my personal opinion, but we'll get into that. I will say, so this is a debut novel of this author, and the writing is actually really good. The prose is great, the detail is great, the characters are great. I mean, there's some characters that are obviously not supposed to be likable characters, so if you don't like those characters, I mean, it's kind of the point, I guess. And in the beginning, it really feels like a slice of life type of story instead of anything else, and it takes a long time for it to really get going. Mind you, this is a short novel. This is probably it's 200 something pages. It's less than 300 pages, and I think it's actually in the former half of the 200s, you know what I mean? Like under 250, I want to say. I could be wrong off the top of my head, but it's a short novel, and yet it still feels like it takes too long to actually get to the thrills, the chills, and the mystery and stuff like that. And which is in itself isn't really too bad, I guess. Like, there are definitely some stories that can pull that off really well, and I'm not saying that it's completely bad in this novel. I just, for what this novel was trying to be and trying to say, I would have liked to see some stuff happening earlier on, I guess, in my opinion. And then once the thrills and everything start coming in, it feels very restrained, in my opinion. It really feels like the author is trying to play it safe, because it starts going into body horror territory, and you know, this kind of gross stuff happens, and it just goes into like this grotesque body horror territory. And there are a couple scenes where it is pretty graphically detailed, but it's also very brief. So a lot of the more violent or gross scenes, maybe not even violent, but the more gross scenes or the more chilling scenes, they kind of are blink and you miss it. I saw some people in other reviews talk about that, and a lot of people seem to like it, so maybe I'm just the minority in that. Some people seem to think that there's a point to that, or like it's trying to, that in itself is a commentary about the beauty industry and stuff, whereas like you can blink and miss a lot of the bad shit going on behind the scenes. I don't know if that is really what the author was going for. That might be a little bit of a stretch. I think maybe to me it felt more like the author wanted to go into some shocking directions, but she didn't want to spend too much time on it, like as if she thought that would have been too much. Going back to what I said, that it feels like she's trying to play it safe, it really feels like She wants to be disturbing, but she also wants it to be more easily accessible to others. Maybe it's like she's scared of taking risks. You know what I mean? She just wants to stay in more familiar territory, and she starts to go outside of that box, and then she just quickly retracts back in. That's the best way I can explain it. And because of that, a lot of the satire parts of it just kind of fall flat for me. Not fully, but like to an extent. She's trying to say all these themes about the beauty industry and about society and about all of these standards of society and about, malpractice in a lot of those industries. But since nothing goes as crazy or as weird as I feel like it could go, it feels like she's just stopping herself from saying even more or being more powerful about it. As it is, the way that the plot unfolds, it feels very familiar. I feel like we've seen these story beats over and over again. And you could say that about most books, probably. Yeah, like there are definitely a lot of reused tropes and stuff like it's inevitable, there to reuse tropes and plot beats because it's been said before, nothing is truly original, especially nowadays, like when there's been so many stories and media created and stuff. But at least you can, mix and match things to kind of make it a little bit fresher. And I see where the author is trying to do that, but at the same time, there are like other stories that I've seen that I've either read or, movies that I've seen that feel like, it's kind of been done in that way before. Like it could, a lot of this book reminds me of Society by Brian Yuzna, the movie, 1989. Weird body horror film. And it doesn't have to do with the beauty industry, but it deals with classism, which this book also deals with classism to a degree as well. But Society is more about classism and all that sort of, stuff, about like rich elite people and shit. And just the way that whole conspiracy kind of plays out, this book kind of feels similar in that vein, except that movie just goes absolutely batshit insane. It does not hold fucking back, you know what I mean? Whereas this book, it feels like it's following that sort of unraveling of the story, but then it doesn't want to go that far, if that makes sense. I'm not trying to say that this book is trying to rip off that movie by any means. I'm just trying to say, like, that's one of the first stories that comes to mind that this story reminds me of, I guess. I also don't like how the villain is way over explained at the end. I won't talk about, like, any spoilers right now. Just generally speaking, after everything's said and done, it just kind of explains all of this person's motives and all of the things that happened to them in their past that made them this way. It literally just pulls Hannibal Rising. So if you've ever read that novel or probably seen the movie, I haven't seen the movie, but I read the novel, and it takes Hannibal, who's like this very interesting and unique seeming character, and devolves him into a textbook psychopath. You know what I mean? There's no more mystery. He just feels like any other person that you've ever heard of that's killed somebody for psychopathic reasons instead of like rage or anything like that. I don't know how to explain it. If that makes any sense. And that's kind of what this book does. It's like, it takes all the mystery out of this person, and it's like, oh, okay, so he's just another statistic. Maybe that is part of the point of this novel. It's trying to say, like, people like this end up being statistics. I don't know. I doubt it, though. The way that this book was kind of giving its messages, it doesn't feel like that was part of the messages, because the book doesn't have anything to do with really mental health. I don't think. Definitely not in criminal mental health, I guess, you should say. And, that would be what that would be going for, I guess. I don't know. basically, I just think that was something that the author was just trying to explain things that didn't need to be explained. Maybe the author thought it should be explained, but it's like, I also don't understand why this is billed as gothic. No, I said in the beginning of this that I'm not sure if I agree with if it's horror. It's definitely thriller. It does. It kind of goes into horror territory, I guess. I mean, yeah. It just doesn't feel like horror, I guess. It feels really more just like a thriller with some body horror tendencies. And even like I said before, the body horror scenes are kind of so brief that it's like, I mean, just it follows that plot of like someone being caught up in a conspiracy that's very popular in science fiction novels, which I find interesting. It feels like, the Minority Report or Blade Runner, those kinds of somebody gets caught up in a conspiracy and they're trying to get out of it. That's literally how this movie unfolds. There's nothing gothic about it. I don't know why it's billed as gothic. I honestly do not understand. Because, yeah, gothic doesn't have to be, like, in a castle with, like, weird fog and atmospheric vibes like that. But, like, it's... I don't know. There's nothing gothic in this novel. I don't know. If anybody is watching this video of me talking about this and you disagree with me and there are reasons why you think it's a gothic novel, please comment it below, because I'd actually like to know. This isn't me just going like, no, you're wrong. I honestly didn't see anything at all in this novel that felt anywhere near gothic. So, if you can prove me wrong, that'd be very interesting. And I'd love to hear it. You know what I mean? So I'm kind of. It sounds like I'm bashing completely on this. Like I hated this novel, but that's not completely true. I mean, the biggest reason why I'm so harsh on this novel, I think, is because it has a lot of potential. I know it could have been so much better than what it is. It's not horrible. It's just predictable, and it just feels familiar, and it's just kind of, plain. And I've seen so many reviews of people saying the exact opposite. And maybe that's just because I am such a huge consumer of weirdo horror stuff. But, to me, like, there wasn't much here that was, that really stood out from other stories. But I did like how it was written, like the prose. I think I talked about it already. But, it was written very well. And I did enjoy following the characters in that regard. So, I mean, it was entertaining enough. I didn't ever feel like I should DNF this book, you know what I mean? It was just underwhelming, but not... It was underwhelming, but it didn't feel like it wasn't worth it, if that makes sense, which is why I'm giving it a 3 out of 5 stars. I do see a lot of potential in this author, so if she comes out with any novels in the future, I'll definitely check them out. So, I mean, it's not... it wasn't a total loss or anything like that. I'm not saying that this book is horrible. I'm not saying you shouldn't read it. These are just my thoughts on it. A lot of people have completely different thoughts. Like I said, it's very highly rated. I see a lot of people raving about it. So, I mean, what do I know? Next, I read That's Not My Name by Megan Lally, which is a young adult horror novel. I don't remember exactly what it was that drew my attention to this, but there's something about this novel that looked really interesting to me. I hasten to say, like, even though it was a young adult novel, because I really don't dislike young adult. I don't really read young adult that often, but if a story sounds good, I really don't care if it's supposed to be for young adult or children's even, stuff like that. I mean, there's plenty of great young adult out there. A lot of times, a lot of young adult and adult fiction kind of overlaps, and it's more like it's only young adult because it's kind of targeted towards kids going through some stuff that might help them out with, if that makes any sense. Young adult is that weird, that weird genre. Some things kind of skate that line, between adult and young adult. I think this is one of them. It definitely feels young adult, the way it's written, but it also deals with a lot of mature themes. I mean, a lot of young adult does. I know a lot of people get really surprised when young adult fiction deals with a lot of mature themes. That's not uncommon. So, if you think that way, try not to think that way, I guess is, but I don't know. This this young adult novel did a really good job of, you know, it has really great characters, really realistic characters. The main characters are in high school. I think they're either third year or last year's high school students, and you know they deal with some stuff, and they, you know, are smart enough to try to like figure stuff out. But it is also realistic in that they're also kind of stupid in some ways that you would expect a teenager to be. You know, they don't always think everything through. Even when they have a good idea, sometimes there's, you know, some stuff or just their inexperience kind of gets in the way. And I applaud this book for being able to juggle that. So many young adult fiction books either make it so the kids are basically like super geniuses that don't need parents to supervise them, or the opposite, where just everything they do is fucking stupid just because they're a kid. You know, that the author thinks, oh, because this is a kid, everything they do needs to be the dumbest thing ever. And it's like, this does a perfect balance. It's like you can tell that this is a character that's on the cusp of adulthood, but they're still not quite there yet, and it just represents that perfectly. The book itself follows two main characters, and one of them is a boy who his girlfriend is missing, and he's trying to find her, and everybody's accusing him of it. Everybody thinks that he might have killed her because he was the last one to see her. Whoops. Hopefully that didn't come up on the audio. I just hit the cable. The last person that was with her was him. She was in his car with him. So a lot of people think he must have done something or killed her or something. And the other person we follow is this girl around the same age, and she wakes up in a ditch, wounded and everything, not remembering who she is, you know, what her name is, or where she came from, where did she go, where did she come from, Cotton Eye Joe, you know, she doesn't she doesn't remember anything, and and then this guy finds her in the police station because he's about to report her missing, and you know, claims to be her father. She doesn't remember him and stuff like that, but he's got all these pictures of her on his phone and everything, so it's like, oh, you know, it must be his dad. So the whole time we're following the boy trying to find his girlfriend, we're following her trying to remember her past and her living with this guy. And I gotta say, like, the ending was pretty surprising, at least to me. I think some people on reviews were saying that they saw it coming from a mile away. I could see you being able to guess it, I guess, but I don't know. To me, I thought it was a pretty good ending, and it was pretty brutal, especially for a young adult novel. I know I was just saying that you shouldn't be surprised with a young adult having like things that adult novels would have, but it's hard to explain it without telling you the ending, so this is going to be very vague, but there's just something about that doesn't feel like a lot of young adult novels would want to go in that direction. You'd think they'd want to be in a more uplifting way. I don't know. I don't know how to say it. If you know, you know. If you know the ending, you know what I mean. It just seems a little brutal. I don't know. Like, this novel was really great. You know, it had some really great... it had some fantastic suspense and tension in it. You know, some good... some really good detail, especially like some pretty graphic violence happens here and there. I also find it really funny. You know, a young adult novel, if it gets turned into a movie, it's rated PG-13, right? You can't say fuck or a lot of other stuff in PG-13 movies, at least not more than like once or twice. And yet young adult novels can swear like pirates. Like, there's quite a bit of cussing in this one. Obviously, I don't give a shit. I mean, I fucking swear all the time. It's just one of those things. It's just fascinating to me. It's like, how come it's okay in a young adult novel geared towards the same target audience as a PG-13 movie, but a PG-13 movie can't? In my eyes, seeing stuff on screen isn't as bad as seeing it in your head while you're reading it. because even if it looks realistic on screen, you know it's fake. And even if the special effects are really good, you can be like, that is special effects. But if you're like reading about something really gory, in your mind it's real. You know what I mean? And also in books, you're usually hearing like, feelings and inner monologue stuff. You know what I mean? So like a lot of stuff, because it's not just cussing you can get away with more in young adult novels. It's also like violence and other subjects. It's just weird to me. Like, I would think that, to me it's less powerful in a movie than in a book. Maybe I'm the minority in that. I don't know, but I have heard other people say like, "Oh, I can do gore in books, but I can't do gore on the screen." I mean, obviously I can do both, but it's like, to me, it's more brutal in the book usually. So I'm giving That's Not My Name a 4 out of 5. I really enjoyed it. I really liked it. I highly recommend it. And if you don't want to read it because it's young adult, and like I said, it definitely feels young adult, but it's not too teeny bopperish, if that makes sense. If you can get past that, if you're not really somebody that likes young adult, definitely try to, because I thought this book was really good. So next book I read was Dead of Winter by Darcy Coates. Earlier this year, I read my first Darcy Coates book, which also happened to be a young adult horror novel, and it was called Where He Can't Find You, and I absolutely loved it, and I was really impressed with it. That one didn't really feel young adult to me, in my opinion. I was just so impressed with that I decided to read another one of her books, and I was really excited to read it, and did not disappoint. I really liked it. There are some conflicting thoughts about this one, not too many. It has to do with this young couple is going on this trip to this. It's kind of like a skiing resort, I guess, with other stuff as well. And it's in the middle of winter, and it's just a small group that is able to rent out this lodge basically and stay there. And things happen along the way. They get caught in a storm, so they have to try to seek shelter, because also there's a fallen tree that blocks their path. So they end up pulling up in a cabin, and then one by one they're getting killed, and they're trying to figure out who the fuck did it, because it seems like it might be one of them that did it. Because it's not just the young couple. I should probably specify there's a bunch of people, just like a, fairly small group of people that are doing this. And this has got some fantastic kills in it, some great gore, really good violence. I sound like a psychopath. And it's even like really suspenseful a lot of times too. It definitely feels like a slasher film, It's like people hold up in a cabin, they're getting slaughtered one by one, trying to figure out how to stop it, or trying to get away from it, or trying to figure out who did it. And it's another one where, just fantastic characters. Everybody's got their own like distinct personality. Everybody feels realistic. People panic, and then other people try to like stop the panic and things like that. Even if there's like a bad decision, it's like you can see somebody in real life making that bad decision, if that makes sense. There's just something about that isolated snowy cabin vibes. I really liked it. I don't know. But I saw a lot of people online saying that, oh, it's obvious who the killer is right from the get-go. Here's the thing. I don't doubt a lot of people were able to guess who did it, but at the same time, the evidence isn't really there until the last third, you know what I mean, of the last act of the novel. And you're getting all this other evidence throughout the whole thing that, oh, it might be this person, or it might be that person, it might be this person, you know what I mean? There's nothing that happens in the beginning that I think people could be like, oh, it's obviously this person. There could be some people like, oh, I think it might be this person. But then there are things that happen that you'd think, that you wouldn't be sure anymore because there's so many possibilities, you know what I mean? But I also know there's people out there that like to lie and be like, oh, I guessed that from a mile away. And it's like, even if they didn't, because I guess they want to look like they're smarter. I don't know. But to me, I had a thought in the beginning, like, wouldn't it be funny if it was this person? And it did end up happening to be that person, but I was expecting it to change to be somebody else. I didn't expect that I'd get it right. if that makes sense. So, I mean, I kind of predicted who it was, but it wasn't obvious. You know what I mean? Uh, but there's a point in the novel where I could see someone be like, oh, yeah, of course, it had to be this person if you look at all the evidence. And that would have been around, like, would have been after the halfway point, or maybe, like, even in the last third, you know what I mean? But there's just so many people that are like, from the get-go, it's obvious, and it's like, how can you say that? I don't know. I don't know if I believe those people. Maybe I'm stupid. No, I didn't really find it predictable who did it, or maybe it's just because I don't really read a lot of like murder mystery stuff. Maybe a lot of people do, and it's like, oh, this is a trope, and that's why they think it's obvious. I don't know, but like judging from like the evidence given in the book that you're supposed to follow, I don't think it's obvious in that regard. And but I will say, the person that ends up being the killer, won't say who, obviously. I do think that their motives are weak as fuck, and I was kind of disappointed in that part of the story. But at the same time, yeah, true. There are people in real life that snap and kill people for less reason. There's some messed up serial killers out there that barely have any real motive. So, I mean, I guess, it is realistic enough. I just think that the way that since everything was so well written in the book, the prose was amazing, the details were amazing, the characters were great. I just, I really think that the motive was just, could have been a lot better. It really should have been a lot better, in my opinion. More fleshed out, more substantial, Even with the weak motive, this book was so enjoyable. All the events that happened, and even a lot of the people that said that it was predictable or it was obvious who it was, a lot of people still said it doesn't detract too much from how good the book is. So I guess that tells you something right there, that the meat of this book is fantastic enough on its own that even if you are able to predict what happens at the end or whatever like that, it's still worth the read. And because of that, I'm giving it a 4 out of 5. I did like it that much, even with some of the issues I had with it. It was just so fun to read and follow everything that, whatever, you know what I mean? I think I said it in another video. There are times that you can suspend disbelief pretty easily if the story's good enough. Obviously, there's still, even if a story's good enough and you throw something from way out of left field that has no logic, but things like a weak motive can be forgiven pretty easily if the rest of the rest of the book is so good that it really doesn't matter what the motives even really are. And that's kind of how I feel about this. It's like, the motives are just an excuse to get us to where we are now. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, so those are the 3 books that I've read recently, and I'm working on uploading my backlog that I've created. I'm still uploading like videos that I recorded in like early January, and for context, right now I'm recording this video on February 25th, so who the fuck knows when this video is coming out. Wishing you well, and let me know what you think of my thoughts on these books, and hope to see you in the next video.